We're often told that a woman of history lived in the shadows of men, bound by tradition and obedience. But in 17th century Paris, one woman lived as if those rules simply didn't exist. Her name was Julie d'Aubigny. With a sword in her hand and a voice that captivated the court, she challenged an entire world. This is a story of her courage, her duels, and her fight for freedom. Welcome to the circle of women history tried to forget until now. I'm your host, and this is Famous and Forgotten Women. In late 17th century France, a woman's life was decided early, often before she could understand what was being decided for her. Her value was measured in obedience, silence, and usefulness. Ambition was unfeminine, desire was dangerous, independence was unthinkable. Marriage was not a meeting of two individuals, but a transaction between families. A woman was expected to submit gracefully, maintain appearances, and treat sacrifice as virtue. Her world was narrowed by design: drawing rooms, kitchens, gardens, church pews. The larger world of politics, duels, public honor, and artistic power belonged to men. Most women adapted. Many disappeared quietly into roles they had not chosen. But a few felt something else: restlessness, curiosity, the sense that life might hold more than polite endurance. Most of those women left no trace. One of them did. Her name was Julie d'Aubigny. Julie d'Aubigny was born around 1673, the daughter of Gaston d'Aubigny, secretary to the king's master of the horse and fencing instructor to aristocratic pages. She grew up not in the domestic spaces reserved for girls, but among boys, blades, and training yards. These were spaces she was never meant to enter, yet she stood in them anyway. Her father trained her alongside the pages as if she belonged there. By her early teens, she was already skilled with a sword, quick-footed, disciplined, fearless. While other girls were taught embroidery, posture, and silence, this was the first rupture in the life prepared for her. A girl wielding a sword was not merely unconventional. She was a challenge to the order itself. At 14, before her life truly began, Julie was married off to the Sieur de Maupay, not by choice, by arrangement. She did not stay. Soon after the marriage, she fled with a fencing partner. Disguised in men's clothing, she traveled from town to town, performing fencing exhibitions, singing in taverns, earning her living through skill and audacity. Each step carried real danger. Dueling was illegal. Cross-dressing was punishable. Leaving an arranged marriage was a crime. At any moment, she could be arrested or worse. But each step also carried her further from a life imposed on her and closer to one she had chosen herself. Her name began to circulate, sometimes in admiration, sometimes in outrage. A woman who fenced, a woman who performed, a woman who loved publicly, a woman who refused containment. By the time Julie reached adulthood, she was already living outside the boundaries of her world, and she had no intention of returning. We do not have Julie d'Aubigny's diary. We cannot know her private fears or doubts, but we can measure the risks she accepted. Dueling was illegal, punishable by death. Cross-dressing could lead to imprisonment. Leaving an arranged marriage was a crime. Publicly defending a woman's honor with a sword was considered outrageous rebellion. These were not symbolic dangers. They were legal realities. When Julie stepped into a duel, she risked execution. When she wore men's clothing, she risked arrest. When she fled her marriage, she placed herself outside the protection of the law. We cannot invent her thoughts, but we can measure the distance between the punishments she risked and the choices she made. That distance is where her courage becomes visible. By 1690, Julie had arrived in Paris, and with her a reputation that preceded her. That same year, she joined the Paris Opera, one of the most demanding artistic institutions in France. She made her debut in Cadmus et Hermione by Lillet, performing under the scrutiny of both the public and the court. Her contralto voice was powerful and agile, distinctive enough to command attention. Audiences listened, critics noticed. But Julie did not confine her life to the stage. Between performances, she traveled, sometimes with opera troupes, sometimes with lovers. Often in men's clothing when it protected her or granted her freedom of movement. She sang in taverns, she fenced in public exhibitions. Her talent opened doors to court circles, commissions, recognition. But it was her refusal to submit that made her unforgettable. One of Julie's most notorious confrontations took place at a royal ball. The room was a study in order and hierarchy. Silk gowns, powdered wigs, rigid etiquette. Julie arrived wearing a velvet suit, tailored for a man. She danced with a young woman, she kissed her openly on the ballroom floor. 3 men took offense and challenged her to a duel. Julie accepted all 3. They expected scandal, possibly arrest. Instead, she fought them one after another and defeated them. The shock was not only that she won, it was that in space designed to deny women skill, force, and mastery, she embodied all 3. Her victory was not merely physical, it was symbolic. During her travels, Julie later fell in love with a young woman whose family confined her to a convent in Avignon. Julie followed. Disguised, she infiltrated the convent and reunited with her lover, but escape required something more than secrecy. When a nun within a convent died, Julie took a risk of extraordinary magnitude. Julie removed the body, placed it in her lover's bed, set the room on fire, and fled into the night. For this act, Julie was sentenced to death in absentia. The court refused to believe a woman could have orchestrated such a crime alone. The sentence was issued under the name Sieur de Maupais. The affair lasted months before the women eventually separated. Julie moved on, alive, wanted, and still in motion. Despite the sentence hanging over her, Julie returned to Paris and to the stage. Her voice secured her place at the Paris Opera, where she performed major roles throughout the 1690s and into the early 18th century. She was not a novelty act. She was a professional, respected for her talent, relied upon for demanding roles. In 1702, André Campra wrote the role of Clorraine in Tancred, specially for her voice, a rare and significant honor in French opera. But in 1705, when her lover, Madame la Marquise de Florensac, died, something changed. Julie withdrew from the stage. She entered a convent in Provence, far from opera houses, dueling grounds, and a scrutiny that had followed her for most of her life. Little is known about her final years. She died in 1707. She was approximately 33 years old. It was a short life, but not a small one. Julie's story is crowded with dramatic moments. It would be easy to reduce her to spectacle, but her significance lies elsewhere. She lived as if her life belonged to her, in a world where women were expected to belong to others. That alone was revolutionary. Her courage was not abstract. It was made of repeated choices taken in the face of real, documented danger. She was not a myth. She was not a legend. She was a human being forcing space for herself in a world that had prepared none. Julie d'Aubigny did not start a movement. No laws were rewritten because she raised a sword. No institutions were transformed because she stood on the opera stage. But legacy is not always institutional. Sometimes it is the simple fact that a woman who should have disappeared from history did not. Most women of her era left traces too faint to follow. Julie's remained through censorship, scandal, and centuries of distortion. Her life shows us something rare, that when a woman insists on being fully herself, even time struggles to erase her. Julie d'Aubigny was a flame that burned twice as bright and half as long. Her story reminds us that even in the darkest corners of history, courage has always found a way. History is full of women like her, women who were bold, women who were first, and women who have been forgotten until now. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, then join us.